Chase Turner walked into the house at 6 in the morning. The door was left half closed, like he'd only stepped out to grab a drink and come right back. But the strange perfume on his shirt didn't lie. It was strong, sweet, and definitely not mine. He kicked off his shoes and was about to call my name. But the place was too quiet. He saw it after 3 steps, the stack of divorce papers on the couch. On top of it sat my wedding ring, tilted under the early morning light. I left exactly 1 sentence, written in the handwriting he knew too well. "When you read this, I'm already done." He froze. Didn't touch it. Didn't even breathe too hard. His face shifted like his mind was flipping through every night, trying to figure out what he'd missed. If he wants to know why things ended so fast, I could put it in one simple line. He never noticed when I started to drift away. To understand why I left, we have to go back a few weeks. Back then, I still thought our marriage was fine, not perfect, not exciting, but steady enough for me to focus on my little photography studio. I, Talia Ellis, never wanted anything big. I liked the morning light hitting the white walls, the way clients smiled when they looked at the photos I took. I lived in the quiet and in the small details most people overlook. Maybe that's exactly why I noticed the shift in Chase before he even realized he was changing. It started with tiny things, the kind people ignore when they're still holding on to an illusion of each other. That night, I suggested going with him to a meetup with his old friends. Chase looked at me for a moment, then said in a tone soft enough to sound harmless, but distant enough to land hard, "I want to go alone. We haven't seen each other in a while. You coming would be weird." I didn't respond, but I took note. Then he started turning off location sharing. Not once because his phone died, but repeatedly. When I asked about it, he just laughed. "Talia, you always want to know where I am. It makes me uncomfortable." I just looked at him. No apology, no argument. I'm not the type who needs to cling to someone to feel valuable. But that sentence told me one thing: he didn't see me the same way anymore. In the days that followed, Chase avoided me even more. He came home late, or strangely early. When he hugged me, the scent of the detergent on his shirt was different. When he kissed my forehead, his lips were cold. The kind of cold that doesn't stay long. I noticed all of it. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I'm used to seeing how light shifts on someone's face when they're lying. My job is to observe. I read the empty spaces. And Chase was leaving a lot of empty spaces. One night, he came home after a meeting. He set his phone face down on the table. When the screen lit up, he flinched just a little. I didn't look, but I heard his breath change. That moment said more than any text ever could. A few days later, I was editing photos in the studio when I got a message from my best friend. "Is Chase not working today? I just saw him near Midtown." I just replied, "Yeah, I'll ask him later." But I didn't ask. I knew whichever answer he picked would be the same tired loop. I met a client, I stopped by a friend's office, don't overthink it. I started shrinking myself. Not because I was afraid of losing him, but because I could see one thing clearly. I was no longer someone he chose to prioritize. I wasn't in his plans for the day, or the night, or the life he pictured for himself. He still smiled at me, still slept next to me. But there was a cold space sitting between us, and it didn't show up on its own. It was built, bit by bit, day by day. I didn't blame him, didn't get jealous, didn't warn him. I just watched, the same way I watch every subject in front of my lens. When a relationship is about to fall apart, the eyes always give it away first. I saw it in Chase's eyes every time he glanced at his phone. I saw it in the way he adjusted his collar before heading out. I saw it in his voice when he said, "I'm busy." Those changes were small, but they weren't random. One night, when he stood in front of the mirror fixing his tie for the 3rd time, I asked, "Is something important happening today?" He looked at me through the mirror and pressed his lips together. "It's nothing. You ask too many questions." I didn't say anything else, but in my mind, a door quietly closed. I knew I was watching a fracture form, and for the first time in years, I didn't try to patch it up. Not because I didn't care, but because I understood something. The more you try to hold on to certain people, the faster they slip away. So I chose silence. Silence to see things clearly. Silence to prepare for something he hadn't even considered yet. I had already begun to realize he no longer belonged in my life. But I didn't say it. I didn't get jealous. I didn't accuse him. I just observed. And my silence became the first signal of an ending Chase never saw coming. Ever since that door closed in my mind, I started seeing Chase differently. Not with suspicion, but with the clarity of someone who knows the familiar is slowly warping into something else. I didn't say anything. I didn't confront him. I just let him reveal himself. And he did. Naturally. At the first company party that month, I asked if he wanted me to go with him. Chase put his tie down and glanced at me like my question was an inconvenience. Just stay home. Showing up with your wife always makes things uncomfortable. One sentence, but it cut through whatever respect I still had for him. I nodded, so lightly he didn't notice. He left the house in his new suit, and I stood there watching the door close, listening to the engine fade down the street. No sadness, no disappointment, just the feeling of another inch of distance he had pushed between us. After that, the moments when he got irritated at simple questions about his schedule became more frequent. No big arguments, just sighs, clipped replies, and that growing edge in his voice. Talia, do you have to ask every time? Can you just leave me alone? I'm busy. Those words didn't hurt me. They just confirmed one thing. I was no longer seen as part of his life. I was like a shadow beside him, not important enough to hold on to, not meaningless enough to let go. Just stuck in a tired in-between. One evening, while I was editing photos, he looked at the shots I'd taken from a kids' session at the studio. He frowned. All that time and this is all you make? You should think about doing something more practical. I'm carrying most of the weight already. I looked at him. No reaction. No explanation that the studio was the one thing that still made me feel like I was living my own life. I just said, yeah. And he turned away, completely unaware of the cold sitting inside that single word. His phone was always face down on the table. Every time the screen lit up, his hand would land on it instantly, like he was afraid I might see something. But I never leaned over to check. I didn't need to. People don't hide their phones because of work messages. They hide them because they don't want to be seen. One Friday afternoon, I went to the grocery store and used our joint card. When I checked the statement, I saw a hotel charge sitting right in the middle of his work hours. Chase explained immediately. I had a meeting with the team. They wanted to switch locations. I forgot to use my personal card. His voice was calm, confident, too smooth. I just nodded and closed the tab. I didn't ask anything else. Only people who lie need long stories, and all I needed was the steady tone he used to build another wall between us. In the days after, new signs showed up. Not big ones, but sharp, like scratches on glass. Once, I borrowed his car to pick up photo props. When I opened the passenger door, a small hair clip fell out. I looked at it for a few seconds. It wasn't mine. I set it on the dashboard. When I returned the car and handed him the clip, he only shrugged. Probably a coworker's. Who knows? Not a beat of hesitation. Not a flicker of unease. That calm told me more than the excuse ever could. Chase also started changing the way he dressed. Suddenly, without warning, he tossed out his old shirts and replaced everything with newer, flashier, younger pieces. Every item he picked looked like it was meant to catch the attention of someone who wasn't me. He spent longer in front of the mirror. Used more cologne. Bought hair products he once said were a waste of money. I watched. No judgment. I didn't say you've changed. I just noted each small shift in the life we shared. I understood the truth behind those changes on a Tuesday night. Chase came home late, carrying a faint perfume on his shirt. Not the kind from the stores he usually shopped at. Not something left over from an elevator ride. It was the scent of someone who had been close to him. Very close. He took off his jacket and asked a question just for the sake of saying something. Did you eat? I answered, yeah. 2 simple words. Not heavy, not light. But he didn't look me in the eyes. He walked straight into the bathroom, avoiding the truth he knew I had already noticed. Chase was never good at hiding his emotions, but he was very good at believing I wouldn't leave. He was used to me staying, enduring, staying quiet, being patient. He guessed wrong. The only reason I stayed silent wasn't fear of losing him. It was because I had finally seen something clearly. The man standing in front of me wasn't just changing. He was becoming someone I no longer wanted to tie my life to. No yelling, no crying, no demanding to see his phone. I'm not the kind of woman who needs to catch someone red-handed just to prove my pain is real. I simply understood that this distance wasn't accidental. He created it, fed it, protected it. He wanted a life outside of me, and he thought I'd never be strong enough to step out of the circle he drew. What I felt most clearly was the shift inside myself. I started becoming careful. Not because I feared more betrayal, but because I was preparing to step out of this marriage in a way he wouldn't see coming. My clarity was my weapon. and Chase never thought I had one. The caution in me didn't last long. It found its answer, and that answer came in a way I never expected. Not from Chase, but from someone completely unrelated. On a Thursday afternoon, while I was adjusting the lighting for a new set of photos at the studio, I got a message from Clara, a regular client. She booked family sessions every summer. Her text had only one line: "Talia, I think you'll want to see this." Attached was a picture. I opened it. No blinking, no sharp inhale, just looking. The photo was taken in front of a small hotel. Warm yellow lights reflected off the sidewalk. In the center of the frame, Chase was walking out with a woman, his hand resting on her back like it belonged there. Not the accidental kind of touch. The kind that comes from being very comfortable with someone's closeness. Not a blurry shot, not an angle you could misread, not something he could deny. It was him, clear, unmistakable. I looked at the picture for a few seconds, then saved it into a separate folder and named it Record. Short. Clean. No emotion. I didn't call Chase, I didn't ask Clara for more details, I didn't send a single accusatory text. I just stood up, closed my laptop, turned off the studio lights, and locked the door. Every movement was so calm it surprised even me. The truth was out, and I didn't need anything else. That night, when Chase came home, I was sitting there looking over my work schedule. He kissed the top of my head out of habit, the way a man does when he still believes he's loved. The strange perfume was still on his collar. I didn't lean away. I didn't lean in either. I just let him do it. In that moment, I knew we'd already reached an ending he couldn't see. Not because I suddenly became stronger, but because I had nothing left to hold on to. My plan to leave started the next morning. No emotion. No bitterness. Just a quiet series of actions. First, I reviewed our shared assets, the things under both our names, the things he assumed I'd never touch. I checked every line, every document. I didn't want anything that wasn't mine, but I also wasn't going to let him put me at a disadvantage. Then, I went to see the owner of the building where I rented my studio. I asked to move the entire lease into my name alone. The manager looked at me for a moment, like he sensed something was wrong, but he didn't ask, he just signed. Another door in my life closed cleanly like that. Over the next few days, I started gathering my personal things, but I did it in small batches. A few books, a backup camera bag, a jacket I liked. I put them in my trunk and dropped them off at the studio. Not enough for Chase to notice, but enough so that when I left, I wouldn't have to come back for anything. I didn't touch his things. Didn't break anything. Didn't play games. I didn't need revenge. I just didn't want to leave pieces of myself in a place where he'd already treated me like I didn't matter. One evening, I opened my phone and scrolled through our old messages. From when we first fell for each other, to the wedding days, to the small arguments. Every text had once made me smile the moment it arrived. Now they were just words on a screen. No weight left. I reread the line he used to write, "I'll always choose you first." I didn't hurt. I didn't feel sad. I just saw the quiet irony time leaves behind. In that moment, I understood something clearly. Leaving wasn't revenge. It was a choice. It was stepping out of a place where I was no longer respected. I turned off the screen. Not a single tear. I'd already passed the stage where it hurt. Now I was in the stage where everything was clear. 3 days after getting the photo, Chase called to say he'd be home late because of an urgent meeting. His voice sounded the same as every other time he lied to me. I said, "Yeah, go handle your work." There was no bitterness in that line. It felt more like punctuation than a reaction. My plan to leave was almost complete. I only had one thing left to do, sort the final paperwork so that when I disappeared, everything would be clear, clean, and impossible to undo. I didn't want to make him pay in the way he imagined. I didn't want to embarrass him. I didn't want anyone to know what happened between us. I just didn't want to stand beside him anymore. People think revenge has to be loud, but some departures hit harder than any scream. Some doors close in silence, and that silence is the deepest cut. Once I walked through that door, Chase wouldn't get a chance to pull me back. Not because I was angry, but because I no longer believed in his kindness. There was no scene of me following him, no confrontation through tears, no "why would you do this?" Just me. Sitting in the living room, organizing papers, packing my life, and waiting for the moment he'd shoot himself in the foot with choices he thought I'd never discover. I looked around the house, the wedding photos, the travel frames. Everything still sat in its place, but none of it belonged to me anymore. They belonged to an older version of Talia. Someone who once believed Chase was a safe place. Now I knew, safety doesn't come from promises. Safety comes from being able to walk away. I put the picture Clara sent into an envelope, not to send to anyone. Just to remind myself I didn't imagine any of it. I looked at it one last time. No pain, no anger, just a lightness. All that was left was to wait for the night he cheated, the night he thought I knew nothing, so I could take my final step. And when that happened, I would leave without a sound. No looking back, no memory strong enough to hold me here. I didn't want to make him pay. I just didn't want to keep living beside someone who had left me long before. That night began like every other night. Chase used to create distance. At 6 in the evening, he sent a short text. "I'm staying late at work. Don't wait up." No emoji, no explanation. Not a hint of someone trying to keep a marriage alive. Just 30 characters that said everything he was trying to hide. I looked at the message. No sigh, no, "Are you sure?" I just set my phone on the table and kept sorting the stack of papers in front of me. That was the moment I knew it was time. Not because he sent that text, but because I could hear the emptiness in his voice, even when it was only words on a screen. I replied, "Yeah, get your work done." 3 words. Clean, cold, no echo. Chase had no idea that the brevity of my answer was the final signal. A few minutes later, I heard the door open and close. His footsteps faded down the hall. That strange perfume, the one he'd brought home for weeks, followed him out this time. It drifted behind him like an unspoken confession. I didn't run to the door. I didn't watch him leave. I didn't ask what time he'd be back. I just stood up and began the work I'd been preparing for days. Every action was light, deliberate, and without a trace of hurry. I went to the bedroom first, pulled the small suitcase from under the bed, the one Chase always forgot existed. I packed the last of my personal things. A few clothes, a camera bag, the little notebook where I jot down shoot concepts, the bracelet my sister gave me when I was 16. Nothing of his. Nothing that belonged to us. Only things that were mine, things that would follow me into a different life. I walked back into the living room, set my wedding ring on the table. The light made it shine, but the shine meant nothing now. It looked more like a misplaced decoration than a symbol. I took out the divorce papers I'd prepared, signed my name. Each stroke was steady. No shaking, no regret. When I finished, I placed the papers next to the ring. The 2 items sat together like twin endings, one for the marriage, one for my effort to keep it alive. Then I opened my laptop and cleared every shared connection between us. Joint accounts, the Wi-Fi password, the family app contacts, anything with the word shared. I changed my own passwords. Everything was done quietly, cleanly. My phone pinged once when it synced. I looked at the screen for a second, then turned it off. The house was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. Not the quiet of peace, the quiet of a room about to lose someone who once lived in it. When everything was done, I stood in the middle of the living room, looked around once. Every piece of furniture was still in its place. The framed photos still hung where they always had. That neatness made it even clearer. I didn't owe this place another second. I took the last small sheet of paper, wrote one sentence. I'm done. No more. No explanation. No goodbye. I set the note on top of the signed documents. My handwriting was calm, like the surface of a still lake. At 10 o'clock, I pulled the zipper on my suitcase. The sound was so crisp, it felt like even the suitcase understood it wouldn't hear it again. I put on my coat, grabbed my car keys, and walked to the door. My hand touched the handle. This is the moment where most people look back at the living room one last time. I didn't. There was nothing left to look at. I opened the door and stepped outside, closed it with a gentle push. The lock made a soft click, a sound Chase would hear when he came home, but far too late to change anything. No looking back. No pause. No trembling. I walked down the stairs, crossed the parking lot, and sat in the driver's seat. When the engine started, I felt an empty space in my chest. Not pain, just the lightness of someone who finally chose herself. I drove out of the neighborhood. No music, no AC, just the sound of the tires rolling over the pavement, the only sound I needed. At the same time, Chase was wherever he'd chosen to be. A bar or some room somewhere, a place where he believed he deserved freedom. He wasn't thinking about me. He wasn't thinking about the house. He wasn't thinking about the marriage he assumed would stay still and wait for him to come back. He laughed. He clinked glasses. He soaked in the feeling he thought was freedom, but was really just avoidance dressed up in dim lights and the perfume of the woman beside him. He didn't know that while he was enjoying his new life, his old one had already slipped out of the hands he thought were safe. He had no idea. Near midnight, I parked in front of the studio. I unlocked the door and turned on a small lamp. The warm yellow light made the room feel softer. I set my suitcase down in the corner. It felt like placing a piece of my life onto new flooring. I sat on the sofa and let out a long breath. Not tired, not scared, just aware of one truth: my choice was made. It wasn't Chase leaving me. It was me leaving someone who no longer saw my worth. If a camera were recording the house I'd just walked out of, it would capture something very clear. Everything in the house was untouched. Books still on the shelves, pillows still on the sofa. The nightlight still set on its timer. Only one thing was missing. Talia. My absence was the real impact. Not loud, not dramatic, but strong enough that when Chase got home, everything in him would collapse at once. He didn't rush to open the door. He still carried the smell of alcohol and the buzz of someone who believed he was finally living the way he wanted. He stood outside for a few seconds, straightening his shirt, checking his reflection in the car window, then pushed the door open like everything inside would be exactly as he left it. "Tal? You still up?" His voice floated lightly down the hallway. No answer. Chase set his keys on the table and walked farther in. The nightlight, set on its timer, cast a soft glow across the sofa. He called again, louder. "Talia?" Still nothing. He frowned. Not out of worry, just mildly annoyed, assuming I was being dramatic by staying quiet. He walked past the kitchen, through the living room, and toward the sofa. And that's when he saw them: the stack of divorce papers, the wedding ring, the small note placed neatly on top. He froze, didn't reach for them, didn't touch a thing. The silence in the room wasn't the kind from any other night. It wasn't the quiet of someone sleeping. It was the quiet of an empty house. Chase called my name again, this time softer. "Talia?" No footsteps, no bedroom door opening. No "yeah, I'm here." He picked up the small note first. "Read the line I wrote." "I'm done." 4 words, not long, not bitter, not accusatory, but he stood there like someone had pulled all the air out around him. He read it again, and again, as if the sentence might change into something else. But it didn't. And neither did reality. He opened the divorce papers and flipped through them. His hand stalled when he saw my signature. He sat down beside the sofa, holding the papers, staring at the wall like it might explain what was happening. Only when he looked around the room did the real reaction start to show. An emptiness. Clear, clean, impossible to deny. A few of my things were gone. My favorite books, the jacket I always hung by the door, my camera bag, the small framed photo on the shelf. Not much was missing. But it was enough for anyone to understand. The person who left had no intention of coming back. Chase drew in a long breath, but it broke halfway through. He stood up and walked into the bedroom. Opened the closet. One side was emptier than usual. Not completely bare, but empty enough to hit him harder than anything else could. He pulled open the dresser drawer. Empty. He looked at the bed. My pillow was gone. Every detail pointed to one truth. I had left with full awareness and complete control. No tears. No trace. A departure so clean it left the person staying behind struggling for air. The climax didn't come from yelling. It came from the short line in the divorce papers. The line he had to read 7 times before understanding that what I left behind wasn't a responsibility. It was the truth. "I'm done." He froze. Not because he lost a marriage, but because he lost the privilege of believing I'd always be there. He sat down on the bed, hands on his head, his breathing growing unsteady. The alcohol in his system started to fade. The clarity of midnight hit him in waves. For the first time in months, he said a sentence meant for no one. "She really left." No one answered. No one stepped out of the bathroom. No one said, "I just needed some space." Chase lowered his head and looked at the empty spot beside him. The space where I used to sleep. The space he never knew how to protect. He didn't cry. He didn't call me. He didn't know who to call because he didn't know where I was, and I intended to keep it that way. That was the moment Chase understood the most important thing he'd always taken for granted. I didn't leave to punish him. I left because I no longer saw my worth in his life. What he lost wasn't a wife, not someone to clean, cook, or wait at the door. He lost the only person who ever looked at him with kindness, even when he didn't deserve it. And that loss wasn't loud. It wasn't furious. It settled the way water stills when the wind stops. A late awakening, a confrontation he could no longer avoid. When the clock hit 3 in the morning, Chase was still sitting on the edge of the bed. The nightlight reflected off the divorce papers spread open on the table. Everything in the room stayed still, as if even time was waiting for an answer from him. But no answer came, only a quiet acceptance. He picked up the note I wrote and read it again. The words didn't change, but the way they landed inside him did. Deeper, sharper. No one came back to explain. No one said why. No one handed him a chance to fix anything. Silence was the perfect revenge. No yelling, no exposure, no humiliation. Just the disappearance of someone who once loved him and no longer belonged to him at all. As the sun started to rise, light slipped through the crack in the door. It landed on the table where the wedding ring still sat. A small object, cold, no owner. The house was still intact, the sofa in its place, the frames on the wall, nothing broken, only one thing missing. The one thing Chase could never get back with an apology or an explanation. Talia Ellis. And that absence would stay with him longer than any wound. In the end, what destroys a relationship isn't the betrayal itself. It's the moment someone realizes they're no longer valued. Talia didn't leave to win. She left because she understood her worth didn't exist in someone else's hands. That's something many people forget. Sometimes your silence and your choice to walk away are the strongest answers you can give. What about you? Would you stay and try one more time? Or would you walk away like Talia? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Thanks for listening to today's story.